Welcome back to Once Upon a Train. I'm your conductor, Michael Campbell. When we last left our heroes, things were looking grim. The once celebrated Fort Wilderness Railroad was gone, and the trains risked falling to the scrapper's torch. In part one, I mentioned that the Campground Railroad story is probably my favorite tale, but I didn't explain why. You'll find out in this episode as I reveal what became of the Fort Wilderness Railroad, some of the products it inspired, where you can find evidence of it today, and maybe in the future. We've got a clean stack and clear track, so welcome aboard.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Once Upon a Train.
My first visit to Walt Disney World was in the mid-1980s, well after the Fort Wilderness trains had carried their final guests. I knew nothing of it until 1998 when I purchased Walt Disney's Railroad Story by Michael Broggie. In a chapter entitled Fort Wilderness Folly, I learned of the railroad's existence and, more importantly, that the fate of the trains was not determined. In another episode, I mentioned that the 6-year-old version of me confidently declared that I'll someday have a real Disney train in my backyard. That intention, as improbable and blissfully ignorant as it was, never really left me. Learning that there were not just 1, but 4 Disney steam trains potentially available grabbed my attention, like a squirrel grabs my dog's attention. By this time, I had gotten to know Michael Broggie, son of Disney legend Roger Broggie and brother to Roger Broggie Jr., who managed the construction of the Fort Wilderness locomotives and cars at Mapo in Glendale. From Michael, I learned that there had been an effort, led by Disney legend Ward Kimball, to acquire and restore the equipment. However, the progress had since stalled. So, empowered by more blissful ignorance, I offered to try to get moving again. I have negotiated many agreements throughout my professional career, so I wasn't fully delusional that we could make something happen. This led me to meeting Ward and some of the other railroaders who were trying to save the trains. I also spoke with several Disney executives whose help would be needed to reach an agreement. I found that there was still much love for the Campground Railroad at Disney, and folks wanted to see these trains preserved. In the end, and with the tremendous support of Roy E. Disney, Walt's nephew and vice chair of the company, an accord was reached. The railroad would be saved. As my mother would say, be careful what you wish for, you may get it. So it was at the moment we forged an agreement that reality crashed down upon me. How do I remove and transport 4 locomotives and 11 coaches to their new homes? In a stroke of luck, one of the people involved is highly skilled at moving big vehicles. Out of respect for privacy, I'm not going to share his name nor the names of any of the other people who now own some of the trains. Suffice it to say that he knew how to get things done, and the trains were loaded up and left Florida just 2 weeks after Disney agreed. Reality wasn't quite done with me yet, though. I still had to build a place to put engine number 4 and coach 401. Luckily, my backyard was undeveloped at that point, allowing a large truck to drive into it. All I needed to do was build 45 feet of narrow gauge railroad track. You can probably sense the approach of even more blissful ignorance. Obtaining and placing the ballast was easy, and a commercial railroad supply company delivered the redwood ties, 25-pound rail, and spikes. My track legging experience up to this point was limited to G-gauge model trains, but I figured, how hard can it be? I asked 2 friends for help. We were going to do the full Gandy dancer method and pound the spikes in by sledgehammer. After bending the first few spikes, we thought that drilling a pilot hole might help. The temperature rose to 113 degrees that day. By the afternoon, the pilot holes grew larger and larger until the spikes were essentially a metal swizzle stick. Undaunted, we continued well into the evening and finally had a combination golden spike ceremony and memorial for those who perished in the building of the Trans-Yard Railroad. A Florida-type drizzle accompanied the train when it arrived on October 26, 2000. We transferred the coach from a flatbed onto a Landau semi-truck trailer that has the ability to tilt down. After lining the trailer up to the rails, we gently rolled the coach onto its new home. Those wheels hadn't moved in about 20 years, but a light application of oil was all that was needed to get them going again. The 2-ton coach could be easily moved with just one hand, and I thought this was going to be a fast and frustration-free installation. The locomotive had other ideas, though. Transferring it onto the Landau was easy enough. However, when the trailer laid down, the engine reached a point of equilibrium where the trailing wheels were on the track, but the front, or pony wheels, were still on the Landau. This locomotive weighs about 5 times as much as the coach, and we could simply not get it to budge through any manual effort. We brought out a forklift to help push the engine into place. Once the balance was broken, though, it rolled fairly fast off the trailer, and the pony wheels landed off of the tracks. As we've discussed, derailments were one of the chronic issues suffered by the Fort Wilderness Railroad. I only needed to move the locomotive about 20 feet, but it still found a way to derail. A boom tow truck was able to lift the engine's front up, and we guided it down to the correct side of the tracks. And there, the train sat for almost 25 years. Plenty of friends volunteered their talents to work on preservation, and encouraging progress was made. I soon learned, though, that restoring a steam train wasn't as easy as Ward Kimball made it sound. Yes, Walt Disney had also done this for Disneyland Engines 3 and 4, but he had a team of Imagineers and the resources of a major movie studio to do it. We kept the train safe and dry, and even fully restored parts of it, like the headlamp. But I realized that a full restoration was going to wait for my retirement. Notwithstanding, though, a narrow-gauge steam train in a suburban backyard is a bit of a rarity. It became the highlight of parties. Local pilots used it as a landmark, and we'd hang a screen on the coach's side to use it for outdoor movies. The entire cast party of the local high school production of The Music Man recreated the Rock Island "What do you talk, number on it. It was the site of many prom photos and even a marriage proposal. Even so, I was disappointed that, despite all my efforts, all I really accomplished was moving a derelict steam train from one coast to another. Apart from the beautiful poster, tickets, and film processing envelopes, none of which were intended to be retail collectibles, there were no contemporaneous Fort Wilderness Railroad souvenirs.
It wasn't until well after the railroad's removal that the trains began to make appearances on commercial products. For example, this is a nice print of engine number 1 with Mickey Mouse. It was part of a 1996 collector set that was only available to cast members.
This pin postcard was released in 2011. The image on the right, of course, is taken from a Fort Wilderness Railroad ticket. Curiously, the ticket number is 100171, the date Walt Disney World opened, but not the date of the railroad's premiere.
And then there are these, a backpack and logo set from Walt Disney World's 50th anniversary. Understanding how these came to be requires a little backstory.
The train's original livery included the intertwined WDW that appears throughout Walt Disney World. I thought my railroad should have its own identity. On my office whiteboard, I designed a new logo by intertwining the letters F, W, R, and R. Dry erase scribble represents the zenith of my artistic abilities, and I called once again on my best friend Michael Aronson to take the concept and transform it into something beautiful. Michael tried many different versions by changing the colors, adding and removing ornamentation, making it look like an observation coach drumhead, and so on. We finally settled on this version. Dave Rose, a good friend who has fond memories of Fort Wilderness, made a little website to celebrate and memorialize the Campground Railroad. At some point in the mid-2000s, he asked to use a graphic of our new logo. I happily shared the file and promptly forgot about it.
That is not original. It's not part of river country. That was created when they built a swimming pool in the Meadow trading area. They decided to put a water tower there as a tribute to the railroad. They found the logo I designed and put it up on the side of the tower, much to my surprise.
The prominent display of our logo in 2009 in the heart of Fort Wilderness was a great, although unintentional, honor. We were equally surprised and honored in 2021, where this logo started to appear on Walt Disney World 50th anniversary merchandise, specifically this backpack and this logo set. I am thrilled that they are using it, and if there's anyone from Disney watching, please don't erase it. I give you a perpetual license to use it as you care to, free of charge, in perpetuity, and throughout the universe. Between this and the Disneyland Railroad Builders plates, I sometimes feel like I'm an accidental Imagineer. Other Once Upon a Train episodes showcase the model railroad products that I've had made over the years. In 2000, my friends at AccuCraft, who produced the exquisite G-gauge model of Walt's Lilybell, created an entry-level live steam locomotive called Ruby. It features the fairly uncommon 242 or Columbia wheel configuration, as do the Fort Wilderness engines. Using my tremendous grasp of the obvious, I asked if AccuCraft would consider making a Fort Wilderness railroad version. They agreed, and in October 2004, released this live steam model along with matching coaches. The enthusiastic public response to it led to an even more accurate electric version along with illuminated coaches. I'm proud of both these models because, one, they serve as an introduction to live steam railroading, and two, help rekindle an interest in the Campground Railroad. In fact, some guests have set up track at their campsites to run these trains, again making Fort Wilderness the site of an operating steam railroad, albeit somewhat smaller than the original. Today, there are very few remnants of the Fort Wilderness Railroad actually at Fort Wilderness. The Bob McDonald poster is prominently presented in the campground's reception lobby. I wonder if this causes guests to ask cast members where they can board the train. The most obvious testament to the former railroad is the golf cart paths. Many of these were laid where the tracks once ran. How many people have walked along these unusually wide paths at the settlement and meadow trading posts, not knowing steam trains once traveled across the ground under their feet? Speaking of the ground, there exist a few abandoned portions of the original right-of-way. Some guests have gathered spikes, tie plates, gauge rods, and even sections of rail they found in these remote locations. To any would-be collectors, please do not venture there. Those are not guest areas and may be unsafe. Fort Wilderness is surrounded by, wilderness. This can include hungry alligators and spiders the size of frying pans, in addition to numerous tripping hazards. Please don't let your vacation be marred trying to find a 50-year-old hunk of rusted metal. The former roundhouse now serves as a laundry facility. The large rectangular hoods that once vented locomotive smoke are now idle, probably unnoticed by any current cast members. One person acquired and restored an original coach that they then brought to Fort Wilderness. Perhaps in solidarity, a family transformed their golf cart into a remarkably detailed replica locomotive and drove it in a campground parade. Over at the Magic Kingdom, there are two references to the Wilderness Line. One is at the Main Street USA station, where the departing trains board reports that number 82, destined for Fort Wilderness, is delayed. Note the numbers of the trains on these boards. Imagineer Jason Grant and his colleagues devised these when they crafted this display in 2021. The numbers represent years associated with Disney trains. For example, 06 for 1906 when the Disney family moved to Marceline, 56 meaning 1956, the year the Disneyland Rainbow Caverns mine train opened, and 12 for 2012 when the Carolwood Park theme transformed the former Mickey's Starland station. The other Magic Kingdom evidence is at the Frontierland station. The train bulletin there simply lists the Wilderness Line as being not scheduled. The railroad's former water tower was repurposed by WDI as a set piece at Typhoon Lagoon. I just recently learned this thanks to my fellow historian Kate Grasso. Kate is better known as the Disney Cicerone, and I heartily recommend her social media posts and books. In Disneyland Shanghai, the cute Whistle Stop Shop features a poster for Mickey Avenue Railways. The locomotive depicted is not a direct match for any actual Disney steam train. However, its resemblance to Jerry Best's Solomana, the inspiration for the Fort Wilderness engines, is unmistakable. These are the only references that I've found. Have you seen others? Please let us know in the comments. As I've said, the Imagineers were quite proud of the Campground Railroad, and I love how they weave these clever tributes into their work.
We ended part 1 with the trains quietly deteriorating. Up to this point in part 2, it seemed that my engine and coach would fare no better. But our story doesn't end here. After 25 years, my Fort Wilderness Railroad engine and coach are undergoing a complete restoration.
I concluded that such an undertaking was simply not going to happen in my backyard. That meant the 20-ton lawn ornament had to go. There was one major difference between the installation and now, 25 years of matured landscaping. We couldn't bring in a landau without destroying many plants and lots of hardscaping. Using a helicopter wasn't feasible, and a crane would have been frightfully expensive. Fortunately, I've made many great friends through my adventures in railroading. Among them is the legendary Jeff Badger. If anyone could remove a steam train from a suburban backyard without leaving destruction in their wake, it is Jeff. Here we see Jeff contemplating his life choices that led to this moment. Jeff and his team rose to the challenge. It was like watching a brain surgeon operate, but one that uses a telescopic handler instead of a scalpel. The coach came out relatively quickly. The locomotive, as mentioned, is much heavier than the passenger car. Removal of some major components, such as the saddle tank, lightened the load a bit. To move the chassis and boiler, though, a creative solution was devised. Use the track I laid in 2000 as if it was just model railroad flex track. There were some very tight clearances, but neither the train nor my home suffered a single scratch. It's now difficult to tell that my backyard once hosted a big part of the Fort Wilderness Railroad. After a few days, all was safely loaded and off to a company that specializes in steam train restoration. We saw major progress in short order. Rusted iron was refinished to where it looks new. Brass that had tarnished for 4 decades gleams once more. Moving parts have been brought back to correct tolerances and operate flawlessly. There's much work yet to do, but I have no doubt that this train will someday appear just as new when it left Mapo in 1973.
You may wonder where this work is being done, how long it will take, and where you might be able to see the engine and coach after restoration. I'm going to tell you in part 3 of the Fort Wilderness Railroad story. Please be aware that it may take at least 1 to 2 years before our story is complete. I'd like to thank Michael Aronson, Jim Fanning, Jason Grant, Kate Grasso, and Tom Morris for their kind support of this episode. Until next time, happy rails.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this Grand Circle tour on Once Upon a Train. For your convenience, the like and subscribe buttons will remain open for at least 1 additional hour. Thank you.